what's up? Welcome to a brand new episode of Part of the Problem. I am Dave Smith, and I am rolling solo for this one. Rob is out on the road, and he's getting ready. I think he's getting on a plane today, and then I'm getting on a plane tomorrow, and we're going to meet down in Tampa. We'll be doing shows the whole weekend at Side Splitters down there, which is like one of my favorite clubs in the country. Always have a great time down there. So really looking forward to it. I hope to see some of you guys out there. If you'd like to come, there still are some tickets available. comicdavesmith.com to go grab some. And yeah, hope to see you guys there. Looking forward to a fun weekend. All right. So for today's show, as you guys know, typically when it's just me, and I do a solo show, I usually like to kind of, I have like a topic, a broader topic, and then I rant about it for an hour. Today, I don't really have anything like that in mind. There's several different things that have happened over the last few days that I wanted to address. So, I'll still be ranting for an hour, but there's several different topics, and I kind of wanted to hit a few of them. And I don't know, we'll see how much time I spend on each one. But a few things have happened that have really caught my eye that are in the news today. And a couple of the stories are somewhat related, but it's not exactly like it all has one clear thread. So I guess I'll start with this. There's a couple of controversies. I don't know. I guess I'm always involved in a controversy now, but there's specifically been two over the last couple days that I did not address. And one of them I meant to address in the show yesterday, but just it never came up. And I think I had planned on pointing this out toward the end of the show, and I might have slightly mentioned this, but I don't think I really got into it. So let's just do that now. So I was I guess the guys over Steven Crowder and his co-host Morgan were, I don't know, they were trashing me a little bit on the show or something. I saw Steven Crowder, it's like with all these things, like I don't watch Steven Crowder's show, but I get tagged on Twitter whenever he says something about me. And we had like gone back and forth a couple times when he was kind of like criticizing me during the war with Iran. And then I guess recently he was criticizing me too. And he also said on his show, he said that at one point that I refuse to go on his show, that I don't show up or something like that, which is like blatantly not true. Literally when he called me out a couple months ago and issued like a public invite for me to come on the show. And I said, sure, I'll do that. And then we never locked down a date. It was like I think we spoke, and then I was like, oh, I'm traveling this week, and then I could do it next week. And then they were like, okay, well, we're off next week. How about the following week? And I was like, well, I'm pretty busy that week. And then we just didn't lock down a date. But like, it wasn't like they kept following up and I kept ignoring or something like that. Like we just never locked it down. I forgot about it. Other things come up. There's just a lot of shit going on. So I thought that was kind of odd for him to like be saying publicly that I'm like refusing to show. So of course I was like, hey, I already agreed to. And then anyway, we messaged back and forth, and we still haven't locked down a date, but like I'm open to do it. So I gave them a date that works for me next week, and I haven't heard back yet. So we'll see. But anyway, just kind of wanted to correct the record on that. But so they, I don't know. I didn't see the segment until after we recorded yesterday's show. But the segment was essentially the why aren't you celebrating if you were against this thing, was essentially what their line was. And I just think, I don't know, I find this to be really, really stupid. And I dealt with this on yesterday's show. So there was like no need to go, like, I was like, I already responded to this, even though I wasn't responding to him. I was responding to Ben Shapiro and all of the rest of them all saying the exact same thing. However, I guess there was this one tweet, which I had like, not even, I didn't even think there was something remotely controversial about this, but evidently this is what the Zionists are very upset at me for. But so I had heard back, because I still have, like I got some normies. I don't even know what to call them. Let's just say I got people who are like, like fans of mine, or people who I know in this world who get a lot of shit for being fans of mine, or who get a lot of shit for like having me on their podcast or whatever, because they're like they also have Zionist friends who are like, how dare you platform this Jewish Nazi or whatever. But so this was evidently a big controversy that all the Zionists on Twitter were saying proves what a horrible person I am or something. So let me just pull up the tweet here, because I think if I read this, you will be like, well, I really am not seeing the controversy there. So here, this is number one. So this is what I said. I was talking to Morgan, who is Steven Crowder's co-host on his show, and he had tweeted something about the celebrating the end of a genocide thing. And so I just tweeted back and I said, it's great that the ceasefire is held for a few days and hostage swaps are taking place, but this is a pathetic attempt at a gotcha. The demand to celebrate before we even know if this nightmare is over makes no sense. So that was essentially the tweet. And if you don't like see anything controversial with that, that's because you're not like an insane Zionist. But the thing that people objected to there was that I said hostage swaps. And so they jumped on this immediately and they were like, hostage swaps, what are you talking about? This is the only hostages are the ones in Gaza. The people Israel are releasing are terrorists. And in fact, see if I could find this here, but the Babylon Bee guy, let me see if I can find this, because he specifically said it, which I appreciated that he just said it out loud. Both of the Babylon Bee guys, Seth Dillon, said hostage swaps is dishonest framing meant to create an illusion of moral equivalence where none exists. But his partner actually went a bit further, and let me see if I could say, but anyway, I'm looking at a whole bunch of people. Alex Berenson, of course, had to jump in on it. Hostage swaps. Once again, Dave tells us who he really is. Hold on, I want to find the one from the other. I swear I'll stop reading tweets in a second, but I did want to find the one from the other Babylon Bee guy, because he really actually kind of said the quiet part out loud, if you ask me. And we could go through this and we could see who here is being crazy. Okay, so Joel Berry, the other guy, he says, hostage swaps, ? You mean Israel getting 20 hostages in exchange for almost 2,000 psychotic terrorists, many of whom are guilty of stabbing, shooting, and raping innocent men, women, and children to death. Is that what you really mean by hostage swaps? So, just to be clear about this, all right? When I said hostage swaps, I meant hostage swaps. And I don't care. It's like, look, he literally said, this is what I find so interesting, is he says 2,000 psychotic terrorists. Now, this to me was just a great example of the disconnect that has really come to define American politics over the last 2 years. So these guys are like, and again, it's not, I don't even hate the Babylon Bee guys. I don't know. These were guys who were like, probably would have had nothing but nice things to say about me pre-October 7th. They did some funny stuff on other issues, and I think probably they were pretty good on COVID. Would have to double check that, but I feel like probably they were. And so I can't, it's like, kind of like them on that. They were definitely good on wokeism and some other issues that I care about, probably immigration, if I had to guess. But so I'm not saying it's not that you guys are like evil, psychotic people. It's more like you're animated by some evil spirit or something like that. Like when it comes to this issue, it just takes over your mind. But from your perspective, obviously, yes, like everybody on the Israeli side is an angel and everybody on the Palestinian side is a savage. And so it seems crazy that I would even say hostage swaps. Like, I mean, we all know, as Joel Berry just said, all the 2,000 over there, they're all terrorists. By definition, I mean, they're Palestinian, right? So they're all terrorists, except that's not true. And this is widely reported and admitted by the Israelis. 1,700 of the 2,000 that Israel released were people that Israel was holding with no charges, let alone a trial. They haven't been charged with anything. No military tribunal, no criminal trial, obviously. Nothing, not even charged with crimes. So yeah, like there's this interesting dynamic, and it's funny because they decide to pick this fight, but then they are like totally unprepared to have it. In fact, I don't think they've even like thought this through. But just to be clear, by the way, for those of you guys who want to immediately say, well, hey, this is wartime, and so not everybody gets charges. It's like, okay, there's 1,700 people they rounded up in Gaza. But, on top of that, this is what Israel's been doing to Palestinians since way before the last 2 years. So if you want to say it's wartime, well, then the war has been going on since 1947. Like they just do this to Palestinians all the time. Israel over the years has held thousands and thousands of Palestinian prisoners, many of whom never receive charges or a trial. And then the ones who do go in front of like military tribunals, I think they have like a 99% conviction rate or something like that. Like essentially it's all bullshit. And, anyway, so it is viewed as it's just a given that all of these, as he says, all of them are terrorists. All of them. Okay, now, according to an Israeli database, they estimated that 75% of the prisoners that Israel was holding were not fighters. This is what they. So you're talking about if we are working on like modern civilization standards, then yes, these are innocent people. They get the presumption of innocence. If you think of them as people, if you don't think of them as all as subhuman, if you think of them as human beings, then yes, they get the presumption of innocence. It's one of the things, and again, this is the dynamic that comes up constantly in the Israel-Palestine like debate, is that so they say, like there was one man, I'm blanking on who it was who made this statement, but it was a high-level Israeli official. And it was from earlier this year. And they said, because somebody had asked them about the settlers on the West Bank and how vicious they are toward the Palestinians. And, there are constantly these like, there's constantly incidents in the West Bank where, settlers will attack Palestinians, they take their homes, there's all types of things that happen. And one of the Israeli officials said, listen, that's a police matter. And there was something kind of revealing about that, because he was basically going like, look, we're talking foreign policy right now. And you're talking about a domestic police matter. Like, yeah, things happen. This is a country, like as if like someone, you were discussing with Barack Obama or something, or Donald Trump, our policy in Syria. And then someone said, well, look at the people shooting each other in Chicago. And they were like, yeah, but that's a police matter. This is a military matter. But of course, the obvious difference here is that if a terrorist in the West Bank were to attack an Israeli settler, which also happens at times, see, that's terrorism. So it's terrorism if they do it, but it's a police matter if it's done by the other side. There's this constant double standard that must always be applied. Otherwise, you just see the thing for what it is. And so now I don't know about this last batch of 20, like the final 20 hostages that got out. I'm not sure what the percentage is there, but of the hostages in general who were taken on October 7th and have been held in Gaza, many of whom got out earlier, many of whom died, and the last 20 just got out. A huge percentage of them, like a good chunk of them, were IDF soldiers. Now, part of this is because Israel is, a military state. Like everybody serves in the IDF except the super religious communities there. So there's like some religious exemptions, but everybody else serves in the IDF. And so, okay, but those are still soldiers. That's still military. Like objectively speaking, when there is a conflict like this, holding a military guy and holding a civilian are not the same thing. But again, however you feel about either, it's just different. The point I'm making is that to people like the Babylon Bee guys or, dummies like Alex Berenson, they will say, this is just so appalling that you would even suggest there are hostages on both sides. Everyone knows every Israeli held in Gaza is an innocent angel, and every Arab held by Israel is a terrorist. But that's just not true. It's just like, that's just them presuming the conclusion. The fact is that the overwhelming majority of the people who Israel just released were people who had never been charged with anything, and according to their own database, not fighters. Like I mean, it was 2,000, 1,700 had no choice. And then they said 75% of that 1,700 were not fighters. So no, it's just not true. Like these were also people being held. And, you know, again, if you're an IDF soldier and you've been, you know, militarily occupying Palestine for 60 years, and over the last 2 years have been destroying Gaza, it is a little bit of a different calculation. Now, that being said, I was still rooting for those guys to go home. That's why I said it's great that the hostage swaps are happening. But again, it is simply not living in reality. And look, again, I'm not saying this from like, you know, there's like a hysterical leftist way of talking about bigotry, and that's never been me. Like you know, people have their bigotries, and that's that. It's not great. It's particularly ugly when like horrific violence is being inflicted on that group of people, because that's what actually matters. Not like what you think or what you say. What actually matters is what you do to other people. But like the level of almost cartoonish bigotry that you have to go, they're all terrorists. I don't need to know anything else about them. The IDF snatched them. Therefore, they're a terrorist. Like even just factoring in like mistakes that a government made. Like if they got 2,000 convictions on something, you'd go, well, I mean, it's quite possible that not all 2,000 of them are guilty. I mean, we know how government does at everything. It's not as if they're so much better at courts. You know, it's like, you know, just because like the DMV said you did something wrong doesn't mean you did. And it's true for government courts too. And in fact, obviously, there's been lots of, you know, guilty verdicts that have been overturned over the years. But the idea that even when no charges, like they haven't even been charged with anything, let alone convicted in a trial, you can just say with a certainty they're all terrorists and then be offended by my comment. Like this is a thing that's just wild, and it's amazing to watch. It's like a slave master turning around and being offended at like a comment that somebody made walking by. Like, dude, you're offended that I said hostage swaps after you've been cheering on the destruction of a captive people for 2 years. For 2 years, as all of Gaza has been destroyed, you've been cheering it on. As politicians go and sign bombs that are going to go be dropped on real human beings, as they blockade food, as they don't allow food in for months after leveling the place against a stateless captive people, an air force is dropping bombs on a captive people that do not have a military, let alone an air force to defend themselves with. You've been cheering that on, but now you turn around and you're what? You're morally appalled that I didn't in my mind convict all of the people who have never been charged with anything. Sorry. I mean, this is just, it's too ridiculous. And I just felt like I had to respond to that a little bit. Okay, so that's number one. And then number two is a video that at least I saw. I'm not sure if this originated with Dinesh D'Souza, but I did see that he posted it, and a lot of people were jumping on this. It is, I think, equally ridiculous to this other stuff. I do particularly find, you know, Dinesh D'Souza is, you know, we were supposed to debate at one point, and I'm not sure what happened with that. I'd still be down to do that if you wanted to. But one of the things I appreciate about Dinesh D'Souza is that he was essentially a neocon who admits he was wrong about everything. He admits he was wrong about the war in Iraq, wrong about foreign policy general, that he bought into a lot of the lies and, you know, all this stuff. And, you know, what I guess... I guess I appreciate that because, you know, not everybody does that. But at the same time, there is something about cheerleading a war that was just anybody who knew anything should have had a responsibility to be able to know that this was complete bullshit. Like, all the information was completely available. But whatever, you got it wrong, you got tricked, and you advocated for a policy where 1 million people got killed, trillions of dollars were wasted, tens of thousands of our bravest young boys, committing suicide in the wake of the whole thing, not thousands that were killed in the thing. I just kind of feel like you should go away forever. Maybe that's unfair of me. Maybe that's unfair. I just think you should go away forever. I don't think you should ever talk about politics again. You get something that goddamn wrong, and you should go away. I actually think it's kind of reasonable. But anyway, he kind of has, but not completely. But he posted this video, and of course I'll read his tweet along with it. But this is a video of allegedly what he calls a Muslim Brotherhood jihadi. Explains. So he says, a Muslim Brotherhood jihadi explains with a tone of incredulity and excitement how Tucker Candace and some others on the right are helping the cause of radical Islam worldwide. Now, full disclosure, I have no idea if this guy is actually a member of the Muslim Brotherhood or what this is. I just have the video here. That is what you see. But let's play this video and let's respond to Dinesh D'Souza a little bit here.
That we're seeing now, right-wing bases. Who would have thought that Tucker Carlson, of all people, would sit there and be the #1 advocate against Zionism in America today? Candace Owens, did you guys see the Ted Cruz interview where Tucker Carlson rips into Ted Cruz and just completely destroys him? Matt Walsh likewise, and there's a huge Marjorie Taylor Greene. Sean King said to me when we were in the car once, he said, Sammy, you don't understand who Marjorie Taylor Greene is. She's the representative of the most racist area in Georgia. African Americans were told not to go to her area. She's now one of the loudest advocates against Zionism. But here's my point about the Ummah when you said that we've done everything we can. Why has that change taken place? Because we've started to deploy a power that we haven't maxed out yet. Trump is looking at Tucker Carlson, who's saying we shouldn't get involved. Candace Owens, we shouldn't get involved. Matt Walsh, we shouldn't get involved. Dave Smith, Trump needs to be impeached if he goes into Iran. So Donald Trump, because of that scream, because of you here in Kuala Lumpur, because of us in London, because of those in Berlin, in Rome, because we actually decided to speak about it, because it became relevant, because we decided to tweet about it, because we decided to because we decided to do da'wah at last instead of sleeping, what happened was Trump instead went to the Iranians and said to them, listen, I need a way out. I'm going to send 2 bombers. They're going to bomb, but what did Israel say? These 3 sites. Your scream, your voice, it has power. It shifted an entire U.S. foreign policy. It stopped Trump from intervening in Iran itself. And this is the whole point. When people say, why come to Kuala Lumpur? Why go to these places? It's because the power is not there like you think it is. The power is here. We are achieving results. They said that when Trump comes to power, it will be disastrous, like for Muslims in America. Mahmoud Khalil, arrested, released. Rumaysat Oztur, arrested, released. Mohsen Mahdawi, arrested, released. American Muslims for Palestine, tried in Michigan, the case was dropped. Tried in Nevada, the case was dropped. They tried to pass the anti-boycott bill, Marjorie Taylor Greene, she pulled it. They tried to do a non-profit killer bill where the Attorney General would have the unilateral right to remove a tax-exempt status. Guess who removed that clause from the bill? Christian churches who said, why is Zionism intervening in terms of how we decide our non-profit? The reality is that people are making an effort and it's working.
All right. So now, look, Dinesh, of course, in what I find to be a very dishonest way, is not actually making any claims, but he's playing this video and kind of leaving it like, oh, doesn't this say everything you need? That's always, by the way, one of the tells when you're being duped by political commentators is when they don't actually say the part, they just leave you to infer it. Because it's usually them going like, well, I know I can't really say anything about this, so I'll just kind of leave it here. Well, look, the Muslim Brotherhood sure seems to like what you guys are doing or something like that. I just find this particularly from someone like Dinesh D'Souza, who has, I mean, look, by his own admission, gotten issues of wars in the Middle East catastrophically wrong. To like use this cheapest of tricks that, hey, look, these guys in the Muslim Brotherhood who probably don't like Israel are thrilled that you guys are criticizing Israel. Just because obviously the point there being, right, that like, let's say we had the platform and the voice that we have today in 2002. Let's say guys like me and Scott Horton and Candace Owens and Tucker Carlson, where he is now, you know what I mean? Like guys like this, let's say we had all had large voices in 2002. And we were standing up against the invasion of Iraq that Dinesh D'Souza cheer led for. You know, we were trying to stop people like Dinesh D'Souza from getting 1 million people killed. Well, quite possibly Saddam Hussein and his sons and his men would have been thrilled. They would have stood to gain a lot by that. Maybe one of them would have even said, it's great that these guys over there are standing up about this. But again, what does that prove? It doesn't prove anything. Like, any time that you have an opinion on foreign policy, there will be other groups who benefit or lose as a result of that, right? So like, if you are a supporter of what America did during World War II, well, then there's probably a lot of communists who really agreed with your take on that. So it was really good for the communists that America joined the war and fought on their side and partnered with Joseph Stalin. Does that prove that you're like a Stalinist or something like that? Does that prove that you're a puppet of Joseph Stalin? No. This just means that you had a view on that policy. I mean, it does prove in some degree you're willing to partner with the communists in that particular example, but like any one of these conflicts, right? But whether you're on the side of the war or you're against the war, there's going to be an entire faction who agrees with you. You know, there's probably a whole lot of Shiites in Iraq who are happy that George W. Bush invaded. I mean, not, you know, a lot of them got killed in the fighting, but like ultimately would have been happy at the idea of Saddam being overthrown. Again, it's just like a cheap trick. This doesn't prove anything. And as far as, look, obviously this guy, whoever he is getting a lot of things wrong. I mean, like, I don't know, black people can't go into Marjorie Taylor Greene's district or something like that. And no, I don't think just because he said it doesn't mean that actually what's moving my podcast or what I say on the Joe Rogan show or what I say on Tucker's show or on a debate or something like that, that's being determined in Malaysia. Is that what you think, Dinesh? That's what's happening? It's like, look, like I remember reading about this, like, okay, so when the Soviet Union collapsed in 1991, the Soviet Union had invaded Afghanistan in 1980. The U.S. had essentially been attempting to lure the Soviet Union into an invasion of Afghanistan, and they had been arming the Mujahideen in Afghanistan, including Osama bin Laden, kind of like the proto Al Qaeda organization. And when the Soviet Union collapsed, Osama bin Laden and his fighters, they all in their minds were like, we did that. We lured them into this war and we bled them dry and left them running and we destroyed the Soviet Union. That was the Al Qaeda takeaway from the Soviet Union collapsing. And also the American takeaway was that we destroyed the Soviet Union because we got them into this war in Afghanistan and got them to bleed themselves dry and all of our, containment policies and all this stuff. And then also, like the people of the republics and the other satellites that were controlled by the Soviet Union, they also thought they were responsible for bringing the Soviet Union down. Now, the truth is, I don't know, it's like, I don't know, maybe all these factors, everybody played in a little bit, but like, it's from this guy's perspective, it might be the case that, it's because we're making so much noise that these people in America started to turn on Israel. But it's just not true. It's not true with any of the people he's named. Like, there's just no way. There's no way that any reasonable person could be convinced that Tucker Carlson or Candace Owens or myself or Marjorie Taylor Greene, or who were the other people who he listed there? I think that those were definitely most of them. You think any of us were taking our cues from the Muslim Brotherhood? Like, that's what we got. I've never cited a Muslim Brotherhood source in my life. I mean, like, what are you talking about? Because it had nothing to do with anything you were saying in Indonesia or Malaysia or Egypt or wherever. What happened is just that Israel has way too much influence on our government, and what they're doing to the Palestinians is just too horrible. And people saw that. That's it. That's the whole scandal right there. So I don't know. I guess it's my punishment in life is that I got to respond to some of these, ridiculous kind of controversies that are made up. But again, this one too, there's just nothing to that. It just simply doesn't prove anything that there'd be some group there who might also agree with you. It's like, again, like, not to make like ridiculous examples, but down to like, being like Hitler loved dogs. You know what I mean? Like, if you love dogs, that doesn't mean you're somehow on the same team or sympathetic to Adolf Hitler. And if you are for almost any policy you could think of, there will be people who you probably don't agree with on a lot of other things who will be for that policy also. It's just, that's what happens. And so if you are an immigration restrictionist, there will probably be some racists who like what you're saying there. If you are, for open borders, there'll probably be some anti-white racists who really like what you're saying there. But that doesn't mean that neither of those are an argument against restricting borders or opening borders. Like, it's just not, it doesn't follow. It's a very low IQ way of viewing politics, that, if anybody else ever agrees with you on something, that is what? I mean, you're not exactly saying, but you're posting the video and kind of leaving it to your audience to determine that we're stooges of the Muslim. I mean, like, for example, there's also radical Islamist groups. I mean, for example, right? The Houthis in Yemen, who have been one of the big enemies of all of these Zionists, right? They, of course, were attacking some ships and trying to cause problems for Israel, and at certain points the United States of America, over what they claim was their protest over the treatment of the Palestinian people. Okay, those are the Houthis. They were in a big civil war with Al-Qaeda for years. It was Al-Qaeda on one side and the Houthis on the other. So every time you're bombing the Houthis, you know who's pretty happy about that? Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula. Like, if I had a video of some Al-Qaeda guy saying he really loved that Israel took out the Houthis, would you ever imagine me holding that over Dinesh D'Souza's head? I mean, these guys, by the way, in Libya, Syria, and Yemen, supported fighting on the side of Al-Qaeda. So you throw Muslim Brotherhood at me, Dinesh D'Souza, I raise you one Al-Qaeda. Actual enemies of the American people. Not just the enemies of the military dictatorship that the US props up in Egypt. Enemies of the American people, Al-Qaeda. By the way, isn't there something interesting? I always thought this was like an interesting dynamic, but that because the neocons essentially got kind of like their first hold on power in the Reagan administration. I think a couple of them went back to Ford, but I think for the most part it was in the Reagan administration that they kind of got in. And for people who know the history of this, there was like Team B at the CIA, and they were Cold Warriors, and they were always, back then, this is when they were first like kind of establishing their relationships with the military industrial complex. And they would always, Team B was famously known for like just coming up with ridiculous like war propaganda, like WMD type hoaxes, but with the Soviet Union, who certainly did have a lot of WMDs, but they would always be cranking out this intelligence that the threat was much worse than it is. This is literally leading up to the collapse of the Soviet Union, which they did not see coming at all. And in fact, a few of the neocons were on record calling out Reagan for being like not nearly hawkish enough with the Soviet Union, because this, I think the George Will line was that he guaranteed another century of Soviet dominance or something like that. And like a few years later, the whole thing collapsed. So they weren't exactly, even back then, they were really, really stupid and wrong about all of their views. But they would do these things where like Team B, this is, would do things where like, I remember one of the examples, it's been a long time since I read about this, but like one of the examples was that they were claiming that the Russians had developed these like crazy high-tech subs that they did not have at all. And then they would run the other teams in the CIA would be like, no, I mean, we checked on the radar and nothing's picking up. But then Team B would say that's proof that they've developed subs that are undetectable by radar. So like whatever evidence you had to them, they always had, you know, some thing about how, no, really, see, that just proves that we're right. But anyway, the dynamic that was really interesting is that this young developing neoconservative movement and Al-Qaeda, or the prototype kind of Al-Qaeda, the Mujahideen in Afghanistan. But this was because there was in Afghanistan, there was like a local Mujahideen, but then there were also like the foreign Arab fighters who, like Bin Laden, you know, Saudis and stuff who came in. And so both the neocons and Al-Qaeda, like their takeaway was that we just defeated the Soviet Union. It was just kind of interesting to me that they end up being, you know, on opposing sides of the war on terrorism, like the George W. Bush government versus Bin Laden and Al-Qaeda. But they both kind of had this origin story of their battle with the Soviet Union. Anyway, just kind of nerdy, interesting history stuff. Okay, so those are the two controversies I wanted to get out of the way. And I did. Okay, let's go to the Gavin Newsom video. I'll be quick on that, and then I'll get to the final topic that I wanted to talk about today. So let's go to. I just thought this was interesting because this was Gavin Newsom was just recently, who almost by default still seems to be the best the Democrats have right now, which is really wild to think about. But like, it's, you know, you start thinking about where we actually are in the schedule or the calendar of this whole thing, which is a little easy to lose sight of because number one, Donald Trump has this weird thing of being president for 4 years, out for 4 years, back for 4 years, which we haven't seen in my lifetime. That has happened before, but we haven't seen it in many years. And so it almost feels like his first term, but you realize, no, this is his second term. And of course, Joe Biden being the candidate in 2020 and then most of 24 left you in a situation where like the last Democrat, who he had a 4-year term, but obviously he has no hope of coming back. You know, I think he just started radiation treatment. He's not coming back to be president. He couldn't even finish his run the second time. Kamala Harris was uniquely terrible. And so she came in and nobody thinks she's seriously going to have a shot at winning the nomination. And no new star has emerged. We're starting to get pretty late in the game. I mean, there's still some time, but like, you'd kind of have to be planning it at this point, or at least coming up pretty soon. And so anyway, no new star. And so Gavin Newsom is almost by default left. You have this party that is in the trash can, is the most like toxic, unpopular brand in America right now. And Gavin Newsom is just kind of there as the well-spoken governor, okay? But at the same time, you're like, Gavin Newsom, first off, your state's a disaster. He's a transparently slimy politician, which is really not what this moment is calling for. And when it comes to the major divisive issue over the last 2 years, this is what he had to say. He got asked about AIPAC. Anyway, let's play the clip and then we'll discuss.
Interesting. You're like the first to bring up AIPAC in years, which is interesting.
I will not vote for a candidate that takes $1 from AIPAC.
It's interesting. I mean, it's interesting. I haven't thought about AIPAC. And it's interesting. You're like the first to bring up AIPAC in years, which is interesting.
Why
I say that? Not relevant to my day-to-day life.
Okay.
Which is just interesting.
Listen,
it's interesting you say that. JPAC perhaps more, but AIPAC less and less.
Okay, fair enough.
Which is just interesting.
What's interesting about it?
That it's just interesting as you bring up AIPAC that it hasn't been part of. I'm just reflecting quite openly and honestly. Hasn't been part of the day to day.
Yeah. The only reason why I ask is because with that, what I'm talking about is lobbying in and of itself.
So there is like, if uncomfortability could come to life and be a human for 20 seconds. I mean, he said the word interesting like 27 times. He's just so clearly uncomfortable, and he just said interesting so many times that the guy goes, why is that interesting? And it's like, because I don't think about it. Like, okay, yeah, I guess in a way it's kind of interesting. Who the hell hasn't been thinking about this? Who the hell hasn't been thinking about the Israel lobby over the last couple of years? I don't know. It's bizarre is what it is. But clearly there, I mean, it was just like a moment where you're like, hey, how the hell does this guy possibly overcome being scared to death to take any stand on what is up there with like the biggest issues in politics today? Now, you could say, hey, I hope, look, it's still late 2025, or you're hoping by 2028, this isn't, as white hot of an issue or something like that. But there's something about being so terrified of taking a position. And you could see it in him, right? Where it's kind of similar in a way to the dynamic I talked about with Charlie Kirk a lot, where he was caught between the rock and a hard place of the young people and the donors. On the Democratic side of things, people are overwhelmingly against what Israel's just done. And of course, when you're talking about liberals and leftists, if you bring up a lobbying group, they're already just totally pre-wired to be skeptical of money in politics, right? And so it's just to take a pro AIPAC position would be like just death amongst your constituents. But then to take an anti-AIPAC position would be the death of your donor class, and you would get just a whole bunch of problems for that. There's a huge cost to be paid for being a critic of Israel at that level of politics. And one of the things that's drastically changed over the last couple of years is that maybe there's not a huge cost, I guess, to being me, or like to being a podcaster who wants to say what you want to say. Well, there's a pretty big audience for that these days, and at least at the very moment we're talking about, we're not living through like a mass censorship moment in the way that we were just a few years ago. So like, for the moment, I can say this stuff and it's like, okay, it doesn't look like I'm getting kicked off of YouTube or iTunes or Twitter or something like that. But if you want to be, as we saw, right, as was demonstrated with Charlie Kirk losing $2 million for, platforming Tucker Carlson and Megyn Kelly and maybe someone else, there's still a price to be paid for that. And at this level of politics, there's an enormous price to be paid. It's not a coincidence that nobody at that level of politics is ever an Israel critic. I mean, just think about that for a second. I think about how I was going to say divided, but I don't even know how divided the population is over this question. But it's at least a huge portion of the population that is totally opposed to Israel, but yet they'll never be represented at the top of politics, right? And so anyway, I just thought this was interesting because it kind of shines a light on a dynamic that is a real problem for the Democrats, just an unbelievable political problem that they have going forward. And you do wonder how you can possibly bridge this gap. I mean, what can you do? You're gonna, like, your plan is to be neutral and just say strange over and over, or interesting over and over. I was like, I don't know. Don't think that's going to cut. All right. Finally, the last thing I wanted to talk about, actually a few other things I wanted to talk about, but probably the last thing we'll have time for. And I guess there were it's kind of like there's two different stories here that I thought were kind of related. And so one of them is has to do with Nick Fuentes, who I just had on the show, as many of you saw. So Nick Fuentes evidently, now I'm not sure about the details of this. I don't know if he was reinstated and then kicked off, or if he like started a new thing and then it got kicked off, but he put his show on Spotify, and evidently it rose up to being #1 on the Spotify charts. Now I don't know exactly how the Spotify charts like measure the rankings. I believe they changed it a bit over the last year or so, but they certainly I know, because I've shot up on that chart before, never to #1. I believe at #2 for a little while, like right after, maybe it was like right after the Douglas Murray debate or something like that. But they give you, like, if you got a lot of action in a moment, you can shoot up those charts. But clearly there was like a ton of excitement for Nick Fuentes' show to be there. It's a real accomplishment to make it up to #1 on those charts, however the hell they exactly measure them. And that seems pretty organic to me. I mean, I know the episode we had Fuentes on was our most viewed episode we've ever done of Part of the Problem, and he's done a whole bunch of other shows that are huge. His show is doing enormous numbers. And then Spotify kicked him off. And there is, I don't know, there's something about that is really fascinating to me. And part of it is that you would just think that even from the point of view of the censorious, desiring people, you know, the people who are happy to see Nick Fuentes' show get kicked off, it is interesting, right, that you would think like the last 10 years would give them a lot of pause about doing this. I mean, Nick Fuentes is one of the most censored people on social media, and has been for quite a while now, for a good portion of the last, what was it, 6 years ago, I think he got kicked off YouTube, and then got kicked off a lot of other stuff. And then a few years, like 5 years ago, I think he had got debanking and was put on a no-fly list and this type of stuff. Or at least that's what he says. I don't know. I haven't seen his banking records, but I don't think he's lying about that. And he's bigger than ever. Like, you threw all of this at him and he's bigger than ever. Wouldn't you think you would look at this and go, hey, maybe that's not going to work? Donald Trump got kicked off of everything, including Twitter. Donald Trump got kicked off of Twitter and Facebook. Like it was at the end of his presidency. He was the sitting president of the United States of America and couldn't tweet. And then he was banned on almost everything. And look how that worked out. It turns out it didn't vanquish Donald Trump or any of Donald Trump's supporters. And at this point, the idea that you're gonna try to squash him before this guy ends up getting big, I think you're a little late to that dance. And I think that all of these, at the very least, the efforts to censor him have not worked. And at the worst, they've backfired and made him stronger. Again, this is from the pro-censorship position. Now, from my position, I just think it is so bad for society. It's just not good. It's not good. Somebody said to me the other day that and I got a few comments like this, that they were outraged that I platformed Nick Fuentes. And I just couldn't even believe it. I just couldn't even believe someone was still saying that. Like, it was like a weird, it's almost like, like when you see those old Mamdani tweets, and he had things where they just sound like a woke Mad Lib. Like, he was like, defunding the police is queer liberation. And you're like, what does that even mean? It's like, I felt like that. People go, did you platform Nick Fuentes? I go, I'm sorry. Are you calling from 2017? Like, what? What are you talking about? I didn't platform him. He platformed me, if anything. I mean, I don't know. What do you mean? It's like a ridiculous idea. They were given this. There's this one guy's show that I did. It was like a smaller show. Not knocking him. I like the guy a lot, but it was a smaller show. And then people who were outraged that he platformed me And you're like, you didn't platform me. Like, what are you talking about? There's just a level that people reach where I think you go, look, as soon as if somebody's got hundreds of thousands of hardcore supporters who are going to listen to everything they do, and then the big shows that they do are going to get millions and millions of views. If you're at that level, you're part of the conversation now, no matter how anyone feels about it. Yeah, there might be things that you disagree with them on. There might even be views they have that you really find abhorrent. Okay, but it's resonating with a large group of people. So you're going to have to take those ideas on now. That is just, to me, like, so obvious. And I just think it's bad for society to not have these conversations. I think that, look, at least in the conversation with me, I thought there were several things that Nick said that I really appreciated very much. Like, him coming out and vocally condemning racial hatred and things like this. I think that I don't see who sees that as a bad thing. And you only get that from having conversations. And look, there were other things that I still disagree with Nick about. We have different worldviews in many ways, but it's also a really interesting conversation. And there's no way to reach him or reach the people who listen to him if you don't at least attempt to grapple with what he's putting forward. And, part of the reason why a lot of these guys don't like to go down that path is because Nick is very formidable. And you actually got to work to grapple with a lot of the stuff that he's putting out there. And so anyway, I just thought that was, and again, just what a win for him. Like, it's so short-sighted, I think, to think that this is going to be like what takes someone down. Like, it's just totally, you're doing nothing but convincing people that you are tyrannical in spirit and incapable of actually engaging in the battle of ideas. It's just horrible. So I did want to say that. Big mistake by Spotify. All right, guys, let's take a moment and thank our sponsor for today's show, which is Kalshi. Kalshi is America's first fully regulated prediction market, CFTC approved in all 50 states. You can bet on just about anything on Kalshi, and what I love about it is you can see where the markets are. Like, for example, is Mamdani going to win the race? Well, you can see how many people are betting and what odds the bettors are putting him as. It's always an interesting indication because people are actually putting their money on the line. So they got skin in the game when they're making these bets. Go check it out for yourself. I think you'll have a lot of fun there. Kalshi.com/Dave is the site. KALSHI.com/Dave. Sign up and trade the truth. Kalshi, where your gut meets real money. All right, let's get back into the show. So there's that. And then the other story that came out, which is, I thought of the two kind of, not that they're the same exactly, but that there's some interesting overlap between the two. But so there was this Politico piece about some leaked group chats from young Republicans groups. And these were like from all over the place. This is reading from the Politico piece here. This exchange is part of a trove of Telegram chats obtained by Politico and spanning more than 7 months of messages amongst young Republican leaders in New York, Kansas, Arizona, and Vermont. The chat offers an unfiltered look at how a new generation of GOP activists talk when they think no one is listening. And so the title of the piece is, quote, "I love Hitler. Leaked messages expose young Republicans' racist chat." Okay, so essentially what they have here, and it's interesting because this is one of the dynamics that I talked about when we had Nick on the show. Essentially, the dynamic here is that they've figured out how young men talk. This is not anything new. This is not anything that any real human being doesn't know. It is a weird, a strange characteristic of the now dead legacy media. Like, the corporate media would always have these things. In fact, South Park did a great bit on this over the Tiger Woods thing. I don't know if anyone remembers this. It was an old South Park where it came out that Tiger Woods had been cheating all over his wife or whatever, and then they'd cut to the news and all the men would be acting like they're appalled, like next to a woman. And the woman would be like, Tiger Woods, geez, why would anyone do that? And then it would cut to some man, be like, I know, right? I mean, who would even want to sleep with lots of attractive women? It's just this weird thing that the media does. I had a bit about this in my first hour about Jake Tapper when he acted like he was appalled over Donald Trump's grab him by the pussy comment. Jake Tapper said he played sports in college and he was in a fraternity and he's been in a lot of locker rooms and he's never heard men talk like that. And you're like, dude, what? Like, never heard? Like, I would maybe believe never participated, although, come on, who can really say they've never said offensive things in their life? But never heard. You never heard another dude talking about pussy. This is a foreign concept to you that is like, no, my God. Of course it's not, but there's a thing you do when you put on a suit and tie and you do the old corporate news things and you say, and action. Earlier today in southern Michigan, there was an incident between blah, blah, blah. And you kind of like assume this fake personality. And then when someone says talks like a regular person, you go, oh, this is appalling. Outrageous comments made in a hot mic incident. But this is just, I don't know. I'm 42. You're talking about young guys here. These are guys in their early 20s, and they're on chat. Me and my friends in our early 20s used to say the most horrible things. And if you go actually read through these chat logs, you can see that that's what 90% of this is. It's like sarcastic jokes. And anyway, there's obviously, look, Politico is running this piece to say, hey, look, there's a Nazi problem amongst the young Republicans here. Nick Fuentes' show is getting banned on Spotify so they can say, look, this, and it's just, this is one of the things me and Nick talked about, is it's like, is the pretense being set up for the next rollback of free speech, for the next attempt? And it's hard to not say, you see, we lived in this era of where, there was tremendous censorship on social media, and that censorship was rolled back. And now you see more Nazi stuff than ever before. And it's just hard to not look at that and go, oh, okay, is the other shoe about to drop here? Are they about to use this as the excuse to roll these things back? I would just say, as I think I've been consistent on this position for many years now, that the censorship is not even if you are very concerned with this trend, you still should be able to understand that censorship is not what leads to a healthy, open society. It's not. It makes this problem worse. And on top of just the fact that it's a horrible thing to do to somebody, it's genuinely wrong. It's a horrible thing to do to somebody to take their voice away or attempt to take their voice away. And I never support that. I just think it's wrong. It's a very fundamental belief. We are all human beings, and all we have in this world really is our mind. That's really what it is to be alive. And to try, to not be a slave and to be a free person is to be allowed to think what you want, and therefore allowed to express what you believe, and also be allowed to get things wrong. There were these standards that were created during the rise of woke insanity that were just totally unrealistic standards. It's cartoonishly unrealistic. And in fact, they seem to be designed to be unrealistic so that there would always be a weapon that you could attack people with. There was one push I remember for a while. This was a radical feminist view that did seep a little bit into the mainstream, a little bit. But there was actually a radical feminist view that said, and there were papers written on this and shit, that they called it PIV, I believe, which is penis in vagina. And the argument was that all sex is rape. All sex. Penetration is rape. So what do you even do with that? You're just so everyone's a rapist? Every man is a rapist and every woman is a rape victim. Everyone. Well, then, okay. What do you do with that? So just everybody's guilty? You just look at it right immediately. You're just well, that's an unworkable standard then, right? And likewise, if the standard is going to be that young men can never be young men, even in a private chat, they can't blow off steam and make offensive jokes. That is a standard that leads to all of the masculine energy being pushed aside. Like, it leads to men, real men, all being excluded, and only the weakest, most feminine men to be allowed in. And it leaves acceptable society with a distinct feminine characteristic. And like, that isn't good. It's not an anti-female thing to say, but like, that is not good. We are yin and yang. There's a reason for both of us. There's a role for both men and women in society. And what do you think it does to those young men when you kick them out of polite society and force them into the dark? Like, what's the goal of this Politico piece? To get all these guys fired and kicked out of politics. It's like, okay. And so where do you think they go from there? Do you think they moderate their position based on that happening to them? You know, especially after the last 15 years of madness, and now coming out of that madness in a world where young people grow up on their phones now. You know, it's not the world that I grew up in. All the crazy things that me and my friends said in our 20s is gone. There's no paper trail. It's not on video, you know? But that's not the reality today. The reality today is it's happening in group chats, and it's happening on social media, and it's happening in 4K. You know, everyone's got a video camera in their pocket at all times, and everyone's got the means by which to share that with the entire world. If we're going to make the standards that if you said something that we consider fucked up, even if it's a joke in your early 20s, that you should be ruined for that, that is like unworkable for society. And profoundly unfair to young men. That's not good, and that's not good for any of us. Okay, I'm gonna wrap there. Thank you guys very much for listening. Traveling tomorrow, but me and Rob will record a few podcasts this weekend, so you'll hear from us soon. Catch you then. How you feeling, Rob, being back in the free country of America?
It's nice being back here. You don't realize how much we have until you have to see Canada. An entire country designed to look like Newark, New Jersey.
It's all right. Listen, Rob hasn't been to Canada that much, and where we went in St. Catharines is not necessarily representative of the full of Canada. Nice people out there, though. We did have a very nice time. We had a great time in Buffalo, great time in St. Catharines. It does when we go to Canada, it does feel like the audience that we draw to our show are the best people in Canada. I'll go a step further. It seems like the only good people in Canada come out to our show. So we support those people. We'll get them out of there before the massive bombing campaign that's inevitable.
I told a lot of Canada jokes that were doing very well. This one got nothing, but I still just think it's true of the country, is that every time I meet Canadians, they're very nice people. I don't understand how they seem to all come together to forge that socialist shithole. Like, there's something odd about when Canadians combine. It's like a bad Power Rangers or something.
I know what you mean. Well, there is something. I mean, there's got to be a connection. I don't have like a fully worked out thesis or anything on this, but there's got to be some connection between like socialist, the way socialism is sold, and taking advantage of like people's kindness. Because it is always sold that way. It's always sold as like, but don't you just want to be a decent person? You know, I mean, come on, like that's be good. I mean, I was I don't know. By the way, I don't know if you've seen this, Rob, and I haven't been like I don't pay very close attention to like local politics in general, even when I'm talking about like New York City. But I have kind of been paying attention a little bit to the New York City mayor race, just because Cuomo announced that he was running again, and that, you know, obviously for obvious reasons, right? Like he was such a major figure in the whole COVID insanity. But there's like of the I'm blanking on his name, but of the like progressive candidates, the guy who's leading is like a democratic socialist. And I saw he had like an ad for his candidacy for mayor, and it's all just like It's all, it's like, hey, you guys think it's expensive here, right? Why don't we just make it free? Why don't we say, hey, we got all these slow buses. I say we make them faster and free. Daycare, that's one of the biggest costs. You know what? No cost for daycare. You're like, oh, all right. Like, it really is like, it's wild to watch it where you're like, what a huge advantage it is just in terms of like selling to normies your policies when you get to just, I mean, look, I'm not saying like he act, but it's like when he just says it'll be no cost. The buses will be free. Childcare will be no cost. And if that's the world you're playing in, like if the game we're playing is that I get to pretend that I just have like a magic wand that can like poof, make things free. And then you're just like, why wouldn't we do it? Oh, you're saying we shouldn't do it? It almost like without saying this extra step, it's just kind of implied, but it's almost like going like, hey, Rob, you have a magic wand and you won't even wave it to make everything free. Like it on some level, it just plays on like, I'm a nice guy and you're like a bad, mean person who just doesn't care. Of course, that's, I don't know. I guess it's a little frustrating because you're like, wouldn't almost every person like immediately go to the question of like, wait a minute, but we can do that? That's an option? We can just make things not cost anything?
I don't know about you, but I always thought the rent was too damn high.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
that guy. Is that guy still around? Is he in the race?
I mean, he made it.
Bring down the rent.
A shockingly long amount of time. And then like people would, it very weird with that guy. I don't know much about him, but he did. Almost everyone knows who that guy is, I feel like. And like people like quote the line, like when you said it, it didn't take me a second to be like, wait, who are you talking? I mean, in any other context, if you were talking about like the guy who perennially came in 7th place in a mayor race, I would have no idea who you're talking about. With that guy, you're like, rent is too damn high, guy.
Lane gonna bring down your rent.
Branding for the win. What can I say? Jimmy
McMillan, 78 years
Jimmy
old.
McMillan. All right. Well, I don't know. I don't know if he's still out there, but this guy is also complaining about the rent being too damn high. Anyway, I always just found it, and this is true in general. It's not just with socialists. I mean, it's true with Democrats in general, to the extent that they borrow a little bit from socialism. But there is like an interesting thing, and it's such a like a comment on either the intelligence of the people who are pushing these policies or their perceived intelligence of the people, of the voters who are listening to them push these policies. But the idea being like, look, if we're gonna, let's just say there's a thing that's got to get funded or whatever, for example, childcare, just because that was the comment in this ad that I saw. So like, there could theoretically be an argument where you go like, okay, so there is this service that is childcare, and there's this one model where like people do it privately. Basically, the model is that you have to voluntarily come to an agreement with the person who's going to be is going to be providing you the childcare. Right. So if someone wants to watch your kids, then you have to ask them how much they charge. If they say they charge X, you can say, I can't do X, but I could do X minus 10. They go, I can't do X minus 10. I could do X minus 5. And you know what I mean? Like that's the model, like a free market in childcare. The other model is that we all, the government, force you at the threat of imprisonment to send us money. We then take that money. We hire the child care, and you don't have to pay for it at that point because you've already paid for it through us. Okay. Now, these are two different models, and you could have an argument about those models or which one you think is better. Now, when you just describe it the way it is, I will admit that the free market model already sounds more attractive because like already you're like, well, I don't know if I like the group with a monopoly on aggressive violence threatening to imprison me if I don't fund the thing. That seems like a worse model. But like, okay, those are the two models. I'm describing the way they actually work. But like, isn't it just something like what a mind fuck it is that the people who support the forced monopoly model get to just describe it as free? You just get it. There's stuff you want. You just get it. As if, I mean, I know this is like the most basic observation, but it's like, I'm still saying it because they're still making this claim that it's like, okay, if the people doing the childcare are getting paid at all, then it's not free. It's just a question of who's paying it and where is the funding coming from. No one gets to just say no cost unless we get to a point where you can, like, either through slavery. I mean, I guess there'd still be costs associated, right? Like that person still has to live and eat in order to show up for work the next day. But either you could enslave them and they just work for free, or you get into the realm of magic. Those are the only ways that things don't have a cost.
So we're saying the reason they have socialism in Canada is that despite them being kind and upbeat people, they're rather stupid.
I'm saying they're really, really friendly, dumb people.
Yeah, they're
that's
gullible.
What we've got.
They're gullible but nice up in Canada. I guess that's what we learned from our 1 hour excursion over the border.
I like to consider us experts. We went a good 20 minutes deep into Canada. We went far enough into Canada where we could still like touch America. We were still on base the whole time. Anyway, it was a lot of fun. Oh, and then I should mention that our next stop is Boston, which I'm very excited for. We just always, me and you always have a lot of fun up in Boston, and we always draw great crowds up there. So that's one of the best comedy towns in the world. So very much looking forward to going up to Boston. That'll be on March 27th and March 27th through 29th. We'll be up at Laugh Boston. ComicDaveSmith.com for those tickets. Also, reminder, it's coming up sooner than later. In May, I will be back at the Soho Forum debating immigration in a live Oxford-style debate in New York City. Make sure you come on out to that, or go to one of the other Soho Forum debates because they're all excellent. thesohoforum.org is the website for that. Okay.
I got dates too.
I'm
Go
doing
ahead. A Libertarian Party state convention out in Iowa in April. I'm also doing a steamboat. If you want to come ski with me and do some skiing,
nice.
You can also email me your porches at robsnewsroom@gmail.com. Put in all that shenanigans together, and then of course the Run Your Mouth podcast.
All right. Well, that's awesome. Go make sure to go see Rob there. Make sure to go check out Run Your Mouth. All right. So I got there's a couple things on my mind for today's show, and I guess broadly speaking, like there's a couple things going on in foreign policy related that I thought were pretty newsworthy events, and then there's also just kind of one of the things domestically, I guess, that is perhaps the most interesting dynamic right now. I mean, or maybe it's number two behind the stuff Trump's doing, but it is really interesting watching the Democrats trying to grapple with the position that they're in. This is kind of the topic of discussion amongst almost every person who's either on left of center, liberal, leftist, everybody kind of in the left half of America. Whenever you see these days, if you see a show, whether it's like Bill Maher or the Pod Save America guys, or just anyone kind of nominally on the left, this is the talk. It's like, what do the Democrats have to do to come out of this? And it's appropriate. I mean, I've seen different times in my life, now that I've been around for a little while, I've seen times where one party was up big and the other party was down and out. There's a few that come to mind. There was when Barack Obama first won and won a pretty dominant victory, people were saying, well, the Republicans have really been defeated. At the time, George W. Bush was going out with the lowest approval ratings for an incumbent president. Dick Cheney had the lowest approval ratings for any vice president. Then here comes in this extremely popular Barack Obama, had some of the highest approval ratings in polling history in America. And now, okay, it seemed like that party had been pretty soundly defeated. When Donald Trump won the first time, people were saying the Democrats were down. It does seem to me that this is different in scale and kind than any other situation like that. I've never really lived through something quite like with one of the major two parties being as devastated as the Democrats are right now. As I've said before on the show, it's to lose your voter base and your propaganda apparatus all in one election is quite a loss. And they've also just lost a kind of cultural factor that's hard to put into words. But I guess to say it in the simplest terms, it's like they made the Republicans the cool kids and the Democrats kind of like the nagging Karens, which is really like, it is for someone my age. I'm going to be 42 next month. For someone my age who was born in 1983, it's hard to overstate how impossible that would have seemed. Like the idea that the Republicans could ever be the cool ones amongst 17-year-olds or something like that just seems like that would have been like unthinkable. As unthinkable as like if you were like, okay, like if you had a bet with someone in like the 11th grade or something, and you were like, I got to turn someone into the coolest kid in school. And I was like, all right, you got to turn the principal into the coolest kid in school. And you'd be like, okay, well, that's impossible. That cannot be done. That was making the Republicans the cool guys is like on that level. So anyway, all of this is going on. And while this is happening, it's interesting to see everybody kind of give their own thoughts on what exactly it is that the Democrats could do. Some say you got to like go harder against Trump. Some people say you got to abandon the woke stuff. Some people say you got to get the working class vote again. And it's interesting, even though nobody seems to have an actual plan to put into action. And so anyway, this is kind of just one of the things that I've been thinking about. And while everyone is talking about this, you see like these different wings of the Democratic Party and, like what their vision for how you're supposed to do this is. This, I guess, is leading to some of the stuff that we're talking about now. In this kind of vacuum, it does seem like there's different Democrats who are kind of like starting to make some noise. I still have not seen anything yet that I think has a chance of being successful. I don't know what you do, Rob, if you think there's one wing or another or one strategy or another that could rise back to be successful, but I'm not seeing it.
I think it's unbelievable how poorly the Democrats are operating right now. The best messengers they have are Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren. They're not doing a particularly good job. Then they had that incredibly cringe video with Cory Booker that they were all reading the exact same script, and they're like trying to be edgy for all their thing of the dignity of the office. Now, like they're trying to figure out how to use curse words, but they don't know how to, like you said, they just don't know how to be cool. It doesn't fit their personalities. Also, the Democratic senators blocked the bill to keep women out of men out of female sports. I think the trans issue is such a loser for them. And their old guard, they're still trying to pitch Ukraine war to the end. And then when they're putting out social media videos, you got that lady who looks like a witch. She put out a weird video last week. They seem to be just at a total loss for how to, and by the way, the branding for them is easy. We're supposed to be the party of the people, and we're supposed to make sure that you guys have good jobs and great benefits. So we're going to go back to what we're doing. Except that they seem to be so in bed with the deep state and to be on that side that they can't not pitch wars. And I think as Elon Musk, we've said it before, has returned freedom to the internet, I don't think that they have the propaganda tools to just try and shame us into if you're not listening to us, you're not nice and you want to kill grandma.
You're exactly right, dude. And I think really the key is that you have to recognize that it's not the way the issue is put out is like, well, what can the Democrats do to get the voters back on their side? Or what can they do to get the working class back on their side or minorities back on their side or something like that? But you realize if that was just the case, then the Democrats would have been operating in a different manner for many years now. Like if the idea was getting enthusiasm and fundraising and votes and getting back, well, then they would have been embracing Bernie Sanders back in 2016. If the goal was to stay relevant and dynamic and win voters in this ever-changing culture, well, they had figures like Bobby Kennedy Jr. or Tulsi Gabbard or people like this. They ran all of them out. with the exception of Bernie Sanders. They attempted to run Bernie Sanders out. They just didn't realize that Bernie Sanders is such a pathetic, loyal dog that he was like, I'll just wait. That's cool. I'll just wait here in the yard and wait till you give me some scraps. I don't care, but the real key there is like at what you said about the deep state. The goal isn't how do we get everybody back? How do we become popular again? That's actually fairly straightforward. The goal is how do we maintain CIA control over this party and get the agenda of the CIA while winning people back? All right, guys, let's take a moment and thank our sponsor for today's show, which is Tax Network USA. Do you owe back taxes? Are your tax returns still unfiled? Did you miss the deadline to file an extension? The IRS may be ramping up enforcement. You could face wage garnishment, frozen bank accounts, even property seizures if you haven't taken action yet. But there is still hope. And that hope is Tax Network USA. They've helped taxpayers save over $1 billion in tax debt. They've filed over 10,000 tax returns. They specialize in helping people like you reduce their tax burdens, and they can help you too. Don't wait any longer. Visit them at tnusa.com/Smith or call them at 1-800-958-1000 for a free consultation. Their experts will walk you through a few simple questions to see how much you can save. Act now before the IRS takes more aggressive steps. Take control today. Visit tnusa.com/Smith or call them at 1-800-958-1000. All right, let's get back into the show. And look, I mean, that might sound a little kooky or whatever, but like, did you see, Rob, by the way, I don't know, we didn't talk about this on the show at all. Did you see who the Democrats had give their official response to the State of the Union speech?
I think it was Bernie Sanders.
No, Bernie Sanders gave one, but that wasn't their official one. No, Bernie Sanders Bernie Sanders did it just like in the same way me or you could do it. Like he just made one and put it up. And yes, that was more, it's so funny because yes, you think of that as the response because yeah, like that's actually to some degree what would represent Democratic voters. But no, they had this chick, oh damn, I'm blanking on her name. But she was a CIA officer. She was literally a CIA employee. I mean, Rob, she's a former CIA employee, which is, doesn't really exist, by the way. If anyone, this is what a lot of CIA insiders have said too. There's no such thing as former CIA agent. No, but she goes and gives the speech. I'm trying to hold on. Well, I'll find her name here. Where was it? Yeah, it's the official Democratic response. It's she's from Michigan. Yes, she's a senator from.
In the chat, I didn't just pull.
Thank you. So she's a senator in Michigan. Now she did. You could say she won her Senate seat, I think, by a very thin margin, but it was in a state that Trump won. So I guess that, that at least says like, well, she must have. Typically, I'm not saying there's
necessarily. The one that put out the cool ad of "Look, I can drive backwards." I learned all sorts of cool shit.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure. I don't think I saw that. But it typically the kind of the traditional wisdom would be that if you on a presidential election day where one candidate wins, if you're from the other party and you won, that would indicate that you must have carried some of their votes because that's who came to show up. So like if Donald Trump wins, 52% of the vote or whatever, well, that means 52% of the people coming out there voted for Donald Trump. If you won, you must have at least won some of his votes. Now, that's not technically necessarily true because people could not vote for president and just vote for their senator, but it's generally probably true. But the woman literally worked for the CIA and she comes out and it gave like a Cold War speech. Literally in the speech, she goes, Donald Trump is cozying up to Vladimir Putin. Ronald Reagan was president when we won the Cold War. If Donald Trump was president back then, we probably would have lost the Cold War. So like that is the CIA's conception of how to win back Democratic voters is to go, we're Reaganites now. Like it's just as if that's where the Democrats, the voters are at. But so that's it. Just to your point, this is literally what they're attempting to do. Well, let's put our CIA woman out there. Maybe she'll win him back over. And it shows you that it's not, again, in the same sense that it's not like, hey, how could MSNBC get higher ratings? How could CNN get higher ratings? Well, we all know lots of things they could do to get higher ratings. That's not really their issue. Their issue is, how do we keep pushing this agenda and get higher ratings? Now, that's much trickier because the agenda has been rejected. But like we've said before, like there's a million ways that you could figure out how to get the number one show in cable news if you were unencumbered by what topics you're allowed to talk about. I mean, come on. Here, I got a new show for you, MSNBC. It's called The Epstein Files. And every single day, this show is dedicated to one news story and one news story only. And that is getting to the bottom of the Epstein story. There was a pedophile ring that was, with American girls being molested and systematically abused. And this involves so many of the most powerful people in our media, in our culture. This guy Epstein had ties to some country in the Middle East, as Dan Bongino would say. We have no idea which one. Okay, do that. We're going to interview victims. We're going to get all the people who were around him and grill them. We're going to put all the best reporting together. And every night we're going to give you more information about the Jeffrey Epstein case. You telling me there's a chance that wouldn't be the number one rated show at MSNBC? Do you think, the video clips would be getting fucking 20 million hits online every single day. Everyone would be driven to it. Okay, they could do that, but why can't they do that? Because they're not just in it for the ratings. That would defeat their entire purpose. They're there to prop up the regime and, through like the deep state or what, that's what they're there to do. So they can't go after. So anyway, what's really interesting about the Democratic situation is that like there will be occasionally you will see some people like real left wingers who will kind of point stuff like this out. They'd be like, we could be opposed to the military industrial complex. That's very popular, And they're like, yeah, but the whole point is we're trying to figure out how we can support the military industrial complex. So that one doesn't exactly work. Anyway, in this absurd vacuum, some of the more colorful figures in the Democratic Party have been out there kind of giving a lesson on, in my opinion, what not to do. But we've got a few of those today. Let's start with let's do the Ilhan Omar one first. Rob, I think you haven't seen this yet, but I did find this to be just pretty damn entertaining.
We recently had one of your Republican colleagues, Brandon Gill, on the show. He said that America would be better off if you were arrested and deported. He also said that there was audio of you advising what he said or illegal immigrants here from Somalia on how to evade ICE detection. I want you to respond to that.
Yeah, again, these are people who have really stopped caring about our institutions, really stopped caring about our Constitution. We know that folks who are here, whether they are documented or undocumented, we know whether you are a permanent resident or you're a citizen, you have constitutional rights. And it is really important for people to know those rights. I know that it is red meat for his base that are xenophobic and racist to say to them that I am going to find a way to arrest and deport a member of Congress who he thinks is doing something wrong when I am doing the right thing in trying to make sure everybody that is within my constituency has the resources and the information that they need.
And she was democratically elected by members by the people in her district.
Yes, of course. But just to follow up very quickly, just be clear, you're not calling all of his base xenophobic and racist, right?
Well, he is feeding to something. He has a petition out. He's getting donations. That's what this is all about. He knows he can't deport me. There is no grounds for my arrest. So this information is only being put out there by him for a reason. And that reason is because he has a base that feeds off of that.
Congresswoman Ilhan Omar, thanks so much for coming in.
I appreciate you all for having me.
Thank you very much.
Is there something, Rob, that's it, we're done with the video, but isn't there something amazing? I know I like to point this out all the time because I do think it's like a subtle thing that sometimes people don't even notice. But it's now, again, of course, most people do, or they at least like know it on some level. But when I say they don't notice, they may not notice the tactic. They notice overall that CNN is completely like corrupt and on one side of the issue. But like, you know how we've talked about this a lot before. Whenever they're like, if they're interviewing Donald Trump, they'll or JD Vance or someone like that, they'll do this thing where like you say something, I ask you your opinion, you give the answer to the question, and then before I start the next question, I just go, we already know that that's not true. Moving on. Do you know what I mean? Like they don't even give you a chance to get back. They're just like, I'll be. But then what does Wolf Blitzer do when he's got Ilhan Omar here? She just says her piece, and then he's supposed to be playing neutral journalist, but then he just turns over and goes, and she was elected by her constituents, as if that ever needs to be pointed out about a congressperson. Like, yes, that isn't that the default assumption of anybody who's in is a member of Congress, that they won an election to get there? But yet he just turns over to go, she got votes, saying that, like, what? Anyway, that's just interesting. But here's a strategy that maybe the Democrats could pursue. How about this? Anybody who objects to her, in her words, giving resources to illegal immigrants so that they can evade ICE must be a racist. There's one strategy. It's like, what? By the way, as I've gone through the polls, before, it was a 50-50 issue amongst Democratic voters whether they support mass deportations. Supermajorities of the American people support it. So she's talking about 50% of Democratic voters, like 50% of the people, of the minority of the American voters who even still voted Kamala Harris. 50% of them, I guess, are xenophobic racists, according to Ilhan Omar. So, like, just saying, of all the strategies, this one doesn't seem to be the best. But maybe I'm missing something, Rob. What do you think? Maybe I'm just racist.
I don't think you're missing much. And it's incredible how poorly she speaks the English language for being a Congress lady. And she's not from Jamaica. She's almost talking like and dressed like a Jamaican lady. That gets a little bit confusing. But I don't think lecturing to individuals who don't like everyone pouring over the border and wanting to control who's in the country and screaming at them that they're racist is a very good way of marketing this.
Well, isn't it wild too that it's like, if you are making this argument, and like I'm doing a debate on immigration at the Soho Forum, as I mentioned, coming up soon, and maybe some of this stuff will come up there. But it does seem to me that unless you're arguing for open borders, like unless you're taking a pure a pure position of there should be absolutely zero restrictions on anyone in the world if they want to come here. If you're not, which is, look, there are some people who take that position. I, vehemently disagree with it. It is wildly unpopular. I don't know, again, like I haven't seen, I've tried to find numbers on like what percentage of the American people support open borders. And the truth is that it is so unpopular that no one even ever asks the question. And I look at all these immigration polls, and it's very hard. I found one ever that I think it got like 4%. And this was from many years ago. The truth, they never even asked that question. They ask, like, would you like higher levels of immigration or lower levels of immigration? Do you support mass deportations or only deportations of violent criminals? Do you like, these are the questions asked? Because at this point, when super majorities, support mass deportations, I really doubt you could get 2% of people to say that they support zero restrictions. But if you want to make that argument, whether people support it or not, you could make the argument. Again, I don't agree with it, but you could make the argument. But short of that, short of arguing that there should be zero restrictions, I don't see how you get to go on your moral high horse here of like, you're a racist, xenophobic if you think that people who came here illegally should be forced to leave. It's like, well, then that's the whole thing. It's like, if you believe in any immigration restrictions, well, then obviously at some point you got to restrict people, right? Even if you were to say that, Americans, we take in more immigrants than anywhere in the world, both legally and illegally, but I think we should take in a lot more. Like whatever the exact numbers were under Joe Biden, we're taking in like 1 million legal immigrants a year. And then they were having hundreds of thousands, to millions pour in every month. We don't exactly know the numbers, but let's just say you were like, I think the number should be way higher. I think we should take in 10 million immigrants legally every year. It's like, okay, well then those 10 million come. And what happens when more come on top of that? I mean, unless you're just for open borders, you'd have to believe in restrictions at some point. Okay, then they have to be restricted. But then to turn around and say that makes you racist or xenophobic or something, it's like, is your argument that if anybody in America does not believe that anyone in the world has a right to come here, whether they follow our laws or don't, and if you don't believe that, you're a bad person somehow? Again, the reason I just mentioned this is just because it's like you see these Democrats struggling to figure out how to deal with this moment. And then it's almost like at least one of them, not that she's a representative of all of the Democratic establishment, she's certainly not, but you have one of them out here who's like, hey, here's my idea. Let's lean into this very popular policy and say that you are an evil person if you support it. And it's just wild to think that anyone would even, like anyone in the game of politics, would think that this is something you could say out loud. But of course, when you do that, you can count on Wolf Blitzer to nod along and remind everybody that you were elected.
Also, when she says that illegal immigrants have constitutional rights, I don't think it's a constitutional right to not be deported. They might have constitutional rights of not being just illegally held in prisons indefinitely.
Sure. Yeah, no, look, well, right. Yeah, it's like, it's not, yeah, you can't torture them or beat them over the head with a club. Sure. Like they still do have like human rights, but they do not, the whole point is they do not have the right to be here. And that's a very different thing. That's a very different claim. Yes, it's true, right? And I'm sure all of us, I know for a fact, me and you support this, right? But it's true that anybody, and the Constitution is clear about this, that anybody who's here, any U.S. persons, any person who is in the United States of America has rights. Meaning, like, if they were charged with murder tomorrow, okay, well, they get a lawyer and they get a day in court. And they get to put up a defense and call witnesses and face their accuser and all of those things. You know what I mean? Well, face your accuser and murder. You understand what I'm saying? But I'm just saying, like, they have basic human rights. Sure. Like we can't just give them the electric chair or throw them in jail for life without a trial because they're not U.S. citizens. Sure, they have rights. But that isn't the question. The question is, do they have the right to be here? Do we have the right to say, hey, you came in here illegally, you have to leave and get back in line if you want to come in here? And how should we feel about a sitting member of Congress who is going out of her way to like obstruct the law and the new administration implementing this legal and very popular policy? That's the question that's relevant. Again, they don't want to answer that. And forget, look, CNN seems happy to go down with the ship too. The other Democrat who is seemingly kind of emerged is this. I'm blanking on her name, but here let's play the next clip that we have here. Do you have the next one, Mike? There we go.
It is not a criminal violation to enter the country illegally. It's not a criminal. It's a crime. It's not a crime, which is why they're so frustrated, because they really want our local law enforcement to go out and round up people when they could be looking out for the murderers and the sexual abusers as well as the robbers. They want them to go and round people up on civil accusations. And so that it is not a criminal violation to enter legally.
All right. So this is all right, let's stop that one. So this is the other angle that I guess they could go with, that it's not we should only be deporting the criminals and we shouldn't be rounding up other people. I don't know, Rob, what do you think?
No, I think this is worse than that, because she's saying it's not a crime for them to have entered illegally. That's not true. It is a crime.
Yeah, that's just false.
Now, if you want to make the argument of, hey, I'd rather use our law enforcement for policing crime than wasting it on immigrants that have come in illegally but have otherwise been peaceful and are actually an asset to our community. You can make that argument. And yeah, you could say, hey, why are we wasting federal resources on people that, even though they came here illegally, are actually making a meaningful contribution? You can go argue that. And that might even be what she's trying to say. But instead, she's just lying and is mistaken when she says that when they came into the country illegally, they didn't commit a crime. That's not English. What does that mean? How do you come into the country illegally without committing a crime? That seems to
illegally crossing the border is a crime. Yes. But right, to your point, I mean, look, like, first of all, I don't even disagree necessarily with look, there really should be an order of operations if you're talking about deportations. And as I've always said, the first most important thing was stemming the flow of illegal migrants coming to this country, which Donald Trump seems to actually be correct in what he said about his State of the Union, which turns out just meaning business about it pretty much takes care of that. I personally have been shocked at the fact that there are record low illegal border crossings. It's really amazing how much of that is a result of just who's sitting in the Oval Office and what does their messaging sound like, which, I guess kind of makes sense in hindsight, but that it's quite a journey to go on, and people aren't going to do it if they think they're just going to get turned away when they get there. And so when Joe Biden's in, you have record high illegal crossings. When Trump's in now, you have record low. Pretty incredible juxtaposition there. But if you want to argue hey, we should go after the violent criminals first, I don't think you're going to get much of an argument out of me and you on that. But the thing is, again, this almost, it becomes more of a philosophical conversation when you're just saying okay, fine. But then but listen, do the people who illegally came into our country, do they have the right to not be kicked out? And I don't really see a compelling argument that they don't. Or that, it's no, you don't. Look, there are places you don't have a right to be. And in a libertarian sense, this is essentially in pure libertarian theory, right? You'd be okay, there are basically two types of people, or maybe you could say three types of people who enter property. Okay, there are the people who own that property, and they can enter it anytime they want to. Then there are the people who are invited onto that property, and they can enter it as at the owner of the property's discretion. And then there are people who are not invited onto that property who enter it anyway. And that is known as trespassing. And trespassers can be removed at the owner's discretion. And so I just don't understand exactly why that theory doesn't scale. Why that shouldn't ultimately scale up to a nation. And that if there are people who were not invited by the domestic population who came in against the rules, why is it exactly that they just cannot be removed? It's an interesting, when you really think about it, Rob, obviously without just getting the detail of the criminality of illegal border crossing wrong, really what the implication from this view is that if you ever make it here, no matter how you made it, this should be home base. You should be safe, like in a game of freeze tag. Can't get me now. I'm on base. And that is just nutty. It makes absolutely no sense. And it is so distant from where the American people are on this issue at the moment.
Yeah, it just seems like the failure of the Democratic branding across the board. Like I said, just last week, they're defending still trans people in female sports. And here you have another issue that the American population would like to get cleaned up. And nope, they're still willing to defend that we need to have humanity. And so therefore, all of these illegal immigrants should be allowed to stay. And also, we need to have compassion on Ukraine. And we need to continue to support that war so that more of their people can die. And by the way, they got low-hanging fruit of just go challenge Donald Trump on the tariffs and that we got a weak economy and he's going to cause a recession for all of the people that are looking to have things be cheaper. You got some winning cards. Go play those.
Yeah. Well, I think, honestly, the Democrats are in a situation now where it's in order for them to actually play cards that are gonna win, they kind of, and this is what it's the kind of the nature of these things. They actually need Trump to make a mistake, and a really big one. Like they kind of can't, it's like that's a challenge in politics. I understand, but they've boy who cried wolfed themselves into a corner. They can't pretend that something is a huge outrage if it isn't, because they've just like that card has been played. And even if Donald Trump does say something that's fairly outrageous, they can't make a big outrage of it because it's like, you do that with everything he says, so it doesn't matter. You have no you have no currency in this exchange anymore. You're going to have to wait for him to really fuck up. You're going to have to hope that he really blows it. And so maybe your strategy could be to try to lure him into making a really bad decision and then exploit that. But that seems to me to be their hope, that he really fucks up, and then they can be like, oh shit, this is a goddamn disaster, and we wipe our hands of it because we were against it or something like that. But I just don't think like they can hope that if Trump proceeds with mass deportations, the implementation of that is really ugly and brutal, and people are like, shit, I just can't support this. And then they could maybe, but to just try to get ahead of the issue when Donald Trump, because again, leaving aside like all the aspects of politics and how Trump actually governed compared to how his rhetoric is, the bottom line is that in the perception of the American people, and somewhat fairly, Donald Trump was saying he wanted to build a wall back in 2016. Donald Trump was saying these people shouldn't be let in back then. And now you're going to bitch and moan that after we let all those people in, that some of them are getting kicked out. But Donald Trump's position was none of them should have been here to begin with. And so he can almost play in this way that like, it is unfortunate. The border czar, what's his name? I'm blanking on his
Harman or something.
Harman. Yeah. Harman, Tom, whatever. Even he said, even the most tough talking immigration hawk in the nation, he said at one point, he goes, it's tragic that we have to do this. He goes, it's a tragic. This is why it's so bad when you don't have a border. Like, this is why it's so bad when you let people flood in illegally by the millions, because now we got to round people up and kick them out. And I got to say that to me, when I heard him say that, I go, that is a winning kind of compelling message, that it's like, yeah, that's right. We quite literally in this case have to clean up the policies of the previous administration. And it sure does suck that falls on us to have to do. There's something about that I thought was like, that's kind of hard to argue with, because otherwise, if you don't accept that, then no matter how much you're against the illegal immigration, or you could say you're against it, your position is that once it happens, we just have to accept it. Once it happens, it's like, okay, the demographic makeup of our nation has been changed by the last administration, and we cannot change that. We have to accept that going forward. And that's going to be a tough sell. That's going to be a very tough thing to convince anyone of, because it'd just be like, well, no, we don't. I mean, we have the legal tools to deal with this. So why is it that you're just asserting it's incumbent amongst us to just accept that now? And that just doesn't make sense to me. In the same way that it never made sense to me that if there is a giant caravan of people coming from South America that are just uninvited people that are not coming in through the legal process of our immigration system, but they're just coming here, why is it that America has to accept them? That just doesn't make sense to me. It's like, it's not, it's like, what under what obligation is the principle that America belongs to everybody in the world equally? Because if that's your principle, and yet only American citizens can vote in elections for the most part, it seems that you're going to lose elections to anybody who says, I think America belongs to the American people, not the world equally, which is, by the way, essentially the core of Trump's message since 2016. And it's the reason why he's been president twice. He's won 2 out of 3 elections, 3 out of 3 if you ask Trump. I'm not sure I'm with him on that. All right, guys, let's take a moment and thank our sponsor for today's show, which is Stash. Brand new sponsor. We're thrilled to have them on board. Saving and investing can feel impossible. But with Stash, it's not just a reality, it's easy. Stash isn't just an investing app. It's a registered investment advisor that combines automated investing with dependable financial strategies to help you reach your goals faster. They'll provide you with personalized advice on what to invest in based on your goals. And if you want to just sit back and watch your money go to work, you can opt into their award-winning expert-managed portfolio that picks stocks for you. Stash has helped millions of Americans reach their financial goals and starts at just $3 a month. Don't let your savings sit around. Make it work harder for you. Go to get.stash.com/problem to see how you can receive $25 toward your first stock purchase and to view important disclosures. That's get.stash.com/problem. Paid non-client endorsement, not representative of all clients and not a guarantee. Investment advisory services offered by Stash Investment LLC, an SEC-registered investment advisor. Investing involves risk. Offer is subject to terms and conditions. All right, guys, let's get back into the show. All right, we got one more video here. You want to play that one? All right, Rob. Well, I started the show saying that Democrats are searching for their way to get out of this hole, and I think they found it. So there we go. That's good. That's going to turn people around, right? Jesus Christ.
I think not only are they floundering on all the policies, they don't have a good salesperson for it. And whatever marketing companies they're overspending money with, as you saw with Kamala Harris, I think she ended up her camp. She spent the most money ever and then still ended up in debt. And in part because they spent a shit ton of money on television advertising. Who was even watching that? And so whoever behind the scenes is going, oh, well, this will be fun. This is how we get the kids back on our side. It's with these goofy TikTok videos because they're looking at Trump and Trump just has that cool factor that they tried to whine him out of office with the dignity, as if jumping in front of a camera like I don't know, a fourth grader could come up with something more creative than that and probably did on a school project for TikTok. They're just floundering. They're just trying to figure out how do we sell our message. And apparently being the adults in the room includes jumping around and putting a, what is that, a Tekken Tag song? I don't even know, but it's terrible.
Yeah, it's also like, isn't it funny? Because look, 2016
Smash Bros. Mike Suarez is a bigger nerd than us.
Suarez you really should have waited like at least 30 seconds so it seemed like you Googled that. There's something funny because like, okay, it's 8 years, a little over 8 years since Donald Trump won his first presidential election in 2016. And okay, 8 years, especially in our current political environment, is a fairly long period of time, you know, in the 24-hour news cycle or whatever. And a lot of stuff's happened since then. But it's kind of wild when you zoom out that so much of the criticism of Donald Trump when he first came on the scene was that he lacks decorum. He's not serious. This is kind of immature. This isn't presidential. This isn't how important people are supposed to speak. And then it's like, you just get so quickly to a point where it's like, well, what are you guys doing? Like it seems like it's like an imitation of what 20-year-olds do on TikTok or something like that. Like this is and it's also on top of that, just so unappealing. This kind of like serious women in pantsuits doing cringy fucking like what world are you living in? Like it's amazing that somehow the Democrats managed to hand Donald Trump the adult in the room persona. You know what I mean? Like somehow he actually does. And this was the case. It was one of the things that was so startling about this last election was that Donald Trump, when compared to senile Joe Biden or cackling Kamala Harris, seemed like the serious alternative. Like at least this guy is here and he means business. and he's got a little bit of an agenda, and he's got some thoughts of his own. And it's not just whatever some big corporate donor told them to say or whatever the popular thing at the moment is. Like, he's got some ideas. And that just seems more serious than anything that the Democrats are putting up against him. But my God, it's hard. It's genuinely hard to even put into words how unappealing that video is. There's just like a disgust impulse that comes from watching that you're like, what the fuck are you ladies doing? Like, what drugs are you on that you thought this might resonate with anyone? It seems like something that you'd like your like adult children would be like digging through their parents' stuff and find a video from college when they did something like that, and you go like, the whole family laughs at it, and they're like, yeah, it's pretty embarrassing in hindsight, but we were 20, and it seemed cool at the time. They're sitting members of Congress are doing this? I don't know, Rob. I don't think it's going to work.
I can't quite peg what experience this was or what this archetype is, but I remember, I'm going to call them the pedophile moms that instead of working jobs, like they hang out at the school for the school plays or the school pictures. And even as like a third grader, they'd come up with some idea and you'd be like, yeah, I'm not doing that. That's terrible. That's what this video feels like.
Yes, that is a very good way to put it.
Yeah, the worst idea from the theater kid mom that did not go that route and is now, doesn't work and shows up to the school to volunteer for these things and just has the worst idea so she can have her one moment in the director chair with 3 third graders. But even those kids are smart enough to be like, oh, this lady sucks. I don't want to do that.
It's like the thing like when you're a third grader and you have no real power, but it's like the thing that one of the like moms would suggest where you'd be like, I will run away. Listen, I will run away. Like, if you make me do this, I swear I will run away. I will go on hunger strike. I will run away and I will never go to school again. I cannot be seen doing this. And they're like, no, come on, it's cute. And you're like, you don't get it. You don't get it. I cannot be seen doing this. Like, it's genuinely that. That's where the Democrats are at. Look, like the interesting thing here, right, is that in order for the Democrats to survive, in order for them to have political success in the future, and this is barring, it's hard to predict the future. And the truth is that Donald Trump is not going to run again, as scared as the Democrats are. This is his last term. There is nobody in line who has what Donald Trump has. Now, we'll see what happens over the next few years. J.D. Vance has obviously risen tremendously in prominence. He is the sitting vice president now, and he's doing a good job in moments like the moment with Zelensky and moments like with Dana Bash, where he's like showing that he can I can go to war with the people who you think of as the other side. And so, but he's not Donald Trump. He has never demonstrated that he has a cult of personality following the way Donald Trump does. He's never demonstrated that he has tens of millions of people who will go to war for him the way Donald Trump has. Okay, so there's that. So someone else has to rise up on the Republican side as well. But it seems to me that almost what the Democrats need is to some degree their own version of Trump. And what I mean by that is not that they have to be anything like Donald Trump. In fact, that is the complete wrong mentality. I think that's the mentality that a lot of Democrats are almost like going with here. Well, we got to find someone like that. It's like the day after the election, they go, we need our own Joe Rogan. We need our own Donald Trump. That's not how it works. Joe Rogan didn't become Joe Rogan by trying to be anyone else's thing. You know what I mean? Like, it wasn't like he was going, hey, we need the podcast version of Dan Rather's. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's not how these things happen. And in fact, like one of the things I was thinking of earlier is something you said that just reminded me of that. But do you remember the when Elizabeth Warren was doing that video in her living room and she's drinking the beer, but she drinks it in such a weird way that you can tell she does not usually have a bottle of beer, but like she's trying to do the like, and it's like that's the
humor with the hamburgers when it was clear that he eats lizard food and he's never cooked a burger in his whole life. Hey, look, I'm a human just enjoying Memorial Day like the rest of you, because
it was a funny thing.
Burgers with the grill that's off.
Well, it's that it's not just that the grill was off, but it's that there was cheese over the raw patties, and you're like, no one who's ever made a burger ever put a slice of cheese over a raw patty. Like, that's just not how it's done. It's a little intricacy, I guess. If you've never made a burger, it might take you a minute to be like, oh, okay, yeah, that makes sense. But like, that's just not how it, And so there's but the whole thing is that it's like their mentality is so off because they're so phony. So they're like, even Elizabeth Warren drinking the beer, right? She's like, hey, well, I'm trying to talk to like workers. And you know what workers like is to have a cold beer after work. And that is true, right? Like, it is true that beer is popular amongst the working class. But look, Donald Trump just carried the working class vote, and he's never had a beer. And in fact, he'll openly say, I've never had a drink in my life. That is not most Americans' experience, but it really is Donald Trump's experience. And so when he says that, it just comes off as authentic. It's like, yeah, dude, my older brother who I looked up to killed himself with alcohol. And I was just like, I'm never going to drink alcohol. And then all of a sudden, you're not just like trying to do the thing that is what they do, but and then it's kind of like, oh shit, that's an interesting part of Donald Trump. Now, it doesn't mean that working class guy who enjoys a cold beer after work is going to stop having a beer. But it was completely unnecessary for that. So anyway, the point is just that what they would need on the Democratic side is somebody who was outside of the CIA deep state system who could work up enough popular support that they just take the party the way Donald Trump did, And so essentially, I'm saying there's no way for them to achieve what they want to achieve, which is maintain deep state control and work up popular support. It's going to have to come from someone outside of that who takes that away from them, in which case the Democrats could come back tomorrow. And that's the truth. Most people at this point, they're not partisans. They don't really care which party it's coming from. They just kind of want to see results, and they want to hear something that sounds real to them. Okay, I do have to wrap up on that. We didn't do the foreign policy stuff, so we'll definitely